My name's Alex. A couple of years ago, during my final year of college, I was desperate for a quiet place to finish my thesis. I didn't have much money, so when I found a listing for a remote cabin at an unbelievably low price, I jumped on it. The landlord was vague about why it was so cheap, but assured me it was perfect for solitude. That's exactly what I needed. The cabin was deep in the woods, surrounded by snow-covered trees. It had no Wi-Fi and barely any cell service, but it was cozy enough. A wood stove, a small kitchen, and a desk overlooking the forest. I brought my dog Max with me for company. For the first few days, everything was fine. I spent my mornings writing and my afternoons hiking with Max. The isolation felt peaceful at first, until the fourth night. It started with a soft tapping on the window behind me as I worked late into the night. At first, I thought it was just snow falling off the roof or a branch swaying in the wind. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. The next morning, I found footprints in the snow outside the cabin. They were large, too large to be mine, and they circled the cabin before disappearing into the woods. That night, Max started growling at the door around 2 a.m., and then I heard it. Someone whispering my name from outside. I peeked through the curtains and saw a figure standing at the edge of the forest. They were tall and wore what looked like a hooded coat. My stomach dropped. They weren't moving, just standing there, staring at the cabin. The next day, I decided to leave early, but my car wouldn't start. It was completely dead. The snow was too deep to walk out without proper gear, so I had no choice but to wait it out. That evening, Max bolted into the woods while barking furiously. I grabbed my flashlight and ran after him. About 50 yards from the cabin, I found him barking at a small pile of rocks arranged in a circle with animal bones in the middle. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I spun around with my flashlight but saw nothing. My heart pounded as Max and I sprinted back to the cabin. That night was terrifying. The whispers came back louder than ever, circling the cabin like whoever or whatever it was knew exactly how to torment me. At one point, I heard scratching at the door. When morning finally came, I packed up what little I could carry and left on foot with Max by my side. It took hours of trudging through knee-deep snow before we reached a main road where someone finally picked us up. Weeks later, after most of the snow had melted, I returned with a friend to retrieve my belongings. The cabin was eerily quiet, but we didn't stick around long enough to find out if whoever or whatever had been there would come back. Last year, my friends and I traveled out of state for a basketball tournament. We were staying at this budget hotel near the stadium, nothing fancy, but close enough to be convenient. There were 4 of us, me, Jake, my best friend Ryan, and our teammates Marcus and Eric. After our game that day, we were exhausted but decided to stay up playing video games in our room while waiting for pizza delivery. Around 11 p.m., Marcus mentioned that he kept hearing faint knocking sounds coming from somewhere outside our room. At first, we thought he was messing with us because none of us heard anything unusual. But then Ryan froze mid-sentence and said he heard it too, a soft knock, knock, knock coming from down the hall. We opened the door to check but didn't see anyone there. The hallway was empty except for flickering lights near the elevator. We went back inside and tried to laugh it off as just another weird hotel experience, but then things got worse. Around midnight, someone started pounding on our door, hard enough to rattle it on its hinges. Marcus yelled out, asking who it was, but got no response. When we looked through the peephole, no one was there. We called hotel security immediately. They came up within minutes, but didn't find anyone in our hallway or on nearby cameras. The next morning at breakfast, we overheard another group talking about how someone had been knocking on their doors late at night, too. But when they opened up, no one was there either. It was last summer when I, Ethan, decided to take a solo road trip to visit my cousin in Arizona. I'd just finished finals and wanted a break from everything. The drive was supposed to take about 10 hours, but I wasn't in a rush. I planned to stop along the way, maybe take some scenic detours. Around sunset, I was driving through a quiet stretch of desert highway when my GPS suggested an alternate route that would shave 20 minutes off my trip. It seemed like a good idea at first. The road was empty, and the scenery was beautiful. But as night fell, something about the route started to feel off. The road narrowed and twisted through hills with no streetlights or signs. My headlights barely cut through the darkness. Then I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror, a car following me at a distance. It wasn't tailgating or trying to pass. It just stayed there, matching my speed. I tried to brush it off as coincidence until I saw her. A woman standing by the side of the road, waving her arms like she needed help. She looked disheveled. Her clothes were torn and her hair was matted. My first thought was that she'd been in an accident or stranded out here alone. I pulled over cautiously and rolled down my window slightly. "Are you okay?" I asked. She didn't answer, but kept walking toward my car, her movements jerky and unnatural. That's when I noticed something in her hand, a flashlight or maybe a tool of some kind. My gut told me something wasn't right. Before I could react, 2 men emerged from the shadows behind her, running toward my car. My heart raced as I slammed on the gas and sped off down the road. In my rearview mirror, I saw them chasing after me for a few seconds before disappearing into the darkness. I drove for miles before finally reaching a small gas station where I called the police. They told me they'd send someone out to check the area. A few days later, I saw a news report about a group of people who had been arrested for luring drivers out of their cars on isolated roads to rob them. The mugshots included the woman I'd seen that night. I still think about how close I came to stopping completely or getting out of my car. If I had, well, who knows what might have happened. Last fall, my family had a reunion at my grandparents' farm in rural Wisconsin. It had been years since we all got together like this. Me, my parents, my cousins, uncles, and aunts, all crammed into their old farmhouse surrounded by fields and woods. After dinner one night, we were sitting around the living room when Grandpa decided to tell us one of his scary stories. He loved doing this when we were kids, spinning tales about ghosts or strange happenings around the farm. This time, he told us about the man in the woods. According to Grandpa, years ago there had been sightings of a strange man wandering near their property at night. He described him as tall and thin with long arms and always wearing a dark coat with a hood that hid his face. People said he'd just stand there, Grandpa said, watching from the edge of the trees. We all laughed it off as one of Grandpa's silly stories, something he made up to spook us when we were kids. That night, after everyone went to bed, I couldn't sleep. The farmhouse creaked with every gust of wind outside. Around midnight, I got up to get some water from the kitchen when I noticed something through the window. A figure standing at the edge of the woods. My heart stopped. He was tall and thin with long arms, and he was watching the house. I ran upstairs to wake Grandpa. When he saw how scared I was, he grabbed his shotgun and went outside with me, trailing behind him. But by the time we reached the spot where I'd seen him, there was nothing there, just footprints leading deeper into the woods. The next morning at breakfast, Grandpa didn't say much about what happened. But before we left that day, he pulled me aside and said quietly, "You weren't imagining things last night." I still don't know who or what I saw that night, but every time I visit that farm now, I can't help but glance toward those woods. When I was in college, I worked part-time at a small radio station hosting a late-night show. It was mostly locals calling in to share ghost stories or strange experiences they'd had. The job was easy and fun until one October night close to Halloween. We decided to do something special. Broadcast live from an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town. It had been closed for decades after reports of abuse came out in the 70s. People said it was haunted by former patients who never left. My co-host Dave and I set up our equipment in what used to be the main lobby, a large room with peeling paint and broken windows that let in cold drafts of air. As we started recording, everything seemed fine at first. Just eerie silence interrupted by occasional creaks from upstairs. But then things started happening. First, our microphones picked up faint whispers that none of us could hear in real life, just on playback through our headphones. Then one of our cameras fell over on its own while recording an empty hallway. The scariest moment came when Dave swore he saw someone standing at the end of a corridor, a shadowy figure that disappeared as soon as he shone his flashlight on it. We wrapped up early because neither of us felt safe staying any longer. When we reviewed the footage later at home, we heard something chilling, a voice whispering, "Get out," right before Dave saw that figure. The next day, we shared our experience on air during our regular show. Listeners called in saying they'd had similar experiences at the asylum, seeing shadows or hearing voices telling them to leave. I quit that job not long after. To this day, I can't listen to those recordings without feeling like someone or something is still watching me. It was a stormy Saturday night, and I, Tyler, was home alone while my parents were out visiting friends. I didn't mind. I liked having the house to myself. I ordered pizza and hopped online to play video games with my friends while rain pounded against the windows outside. Around 10 p.m., just as my pizza arrived, I thought I heard something outside. A faint tapping sound coming from one of the windows near the living room. At first, I thought it might be tree branches swaying in the wind or rain hitting harder than usual, but then it happened again. Tap, 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 this time louder and more deliberate. I muted my headset and walked over to check it out. Peeking through the blinds, I didn't see anything unusual, just darkness and rain pouring down, but something about it felt off. I went back to my game but couldn't shake this uneasy feeling like someone was watching me. Then came another sound. Not tapping this time, but what sounded like someone trying one of the door handles. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and texted my neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, across the street. "Hey, can you see anyone near my house?" A few minutes later, he called me back sounding alarmed. "Tyler, there's a man standing by your side gate." I froze. Mr. Jenkins told me he'd already called the police but warned me not to open any doors or windows until they arrived. For what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes, I sat in silence, listening for any more sounds outside while clutching a kitchen knife for protection. When police arrived, they found muddy footprints leading from my backyard gate to several windows around my house, including one near where I'd been sitting earlier playing games. They never caught whoever it was lurking around that night. But knowing someone had been watching me while I thought I was safe inside still sends chills down my spine. When I was 14, I used to babysit for a little extra cash after school. One family hired me regularly to watch their 6-year-old son, Cody. He was a quiet kid, polite but a little odd. His parents warned me before my first shift that Cody sometimes talked to himself or his imaginary friend Agnes. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Lots of kids had imaginary friends. One Friday evening, Cody's parents were heading out for a late dinner and wouldn't be back until midnight. They gave me the usual instructions. Order pizza for dinner. Don't let Cody stay up too late, and keep him out of their bedroom upstairs. They mentioned, offhandedly, that Cody had been acting a little strange lately, but didn't elaborate. It was pouring rain that night, one of those storms where the wind howls and the rain pounds against the windows like it's trying to get in. After dinner, Cody was on the living room floor playing with his toys while I watched TV on the couch. He kept talking to Agnes, as if she were sitting across from him. "Your turn," he said, moving one of his toy cars toward an empty spot on the rug. "No, cheating this time." I smiled nervously but didn't say anything. Kids have wild imaginations, right? But then one of his toys, a small electronic car, suddenly turned on by itself from across the room. It zipped forward a few inches before stopping. "Whoa," I said, trying to sound casual. "How'd that happen?" Cody looked up at me with a completely serious expression and said, "Agnes is playing with it." I laughed nervously and turned the toy off, telling myself it must have been a glitch or maybe low batteries acting up. Still, something about the way he said it gave me chills. Around 9:30 p.m., I told Cody it was time to start winding down for bed. He protested at first, but eventually agreed, as I was helping him brush his teeth in the bathroom. Upstairs, he suddenly froze and stared at something behind me. "What is it?" I asked. "She's standing in the hallway," he whispered. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there, just shadows cast by the dim light from his bedroom lamp. "Cody," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady, "there's no one there." He didn't argue, but kept glancing over my shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. After tucking him into bed, I went back downstairs to clean up the living room. The house felt eerily quiet now that Cody was asleep. The storm outside had picked up, again, making the windows rattle in their frames. Around 10:15 p.m., as I was folding a blanket on the couch, I heard a soft knock at the front door. My stomach dropped. Who would be knocking this late during a storm? I tiptoed to the door and peeked through the peephole but saw nothing, just rain, pouring down under the porch light. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. My heart started racing as I grabbed my phone and called out nervously, "Cody, is that you?" No response. I crept up the stairs slowly, clutching my phone tightly in one hand. When I reached Cody's room, I found him sound asleep in bed. But then I noticed something chilling. The door to his parents' bedroom at the end of the hall was open, just a crack. They'd specifically told me not to let Cody go in there. I walked toward it cautiously and pushed the door open wider. The room was dark, except for faint moonlight streaming through the window. Nothing seemed out of place until I noticed muddy footprints leading from the window to the closet. I froze. The window was slightly ajar despite the storm outside. My hands were shaking as I reached for the closet door handle and yanked it open. It was empty, but there was something written on the inside wall in what looked like black marker. Agnes says hi. I slammed the closet door shut and ran back to Cody's room. He was still asleep, completely unaware of what had just happened. I stayed by his side for the rest of the night with every light in his room turned on until his parents came home around midnight. When they walked through the front door, laughing about their evening out, they immediately noticed how pale and shaken I looked. "What happened?" his mom asked. I hesitated before telling them about everything. The toy car turning on by itself, Cody, seeing someone in the hallway, and especially what I found in their bedroom closet. Their smiles faded instantly. His dad exchanged a worried glance with his mom before saying quietly, "We've been meaning to tell you about some strange things that have happened here." Apparently, they'd moved into this house only 6 months ago and had noticed odd occurrences. Doors opening on their own, objects moving from where they'd left them, but they didn't want to scare me or Cody by bringing it up. That was my last time babysitting for them. They moved out of that house a few months later after things escalated. Cody started waking up with scratches on his arms that he couldn't explain. To this day, whenever I hear someone mention imaginary friends or kids talking to themselves, I get chills all over again.